Hi.
Hi, thank you all for joining me. And on the other side, I have Dr. Ajay Phadke. Dr. Ajay, thank you so much for coming and doing this. I know how frantically busy you've been. Um, and I'm
No,
really,
absolutely. It's my pleasure.
really grateful that you've taken the time out to do this to answer questions that a lot of people are going to have. I know that for sure. And a quick introduction
Ab-
to people who are joining in. Dr. Ajay Phadke is head of SRL Dr. Avinash Phadke Labs based in Mumbai, India. SRL Dr. Avinash Phadke Labs has been appointed by the Indian Council of Medical Research, ICMR, as one of the private labs to test for COVID-19. And it is one of the oldest labs actually in Mumbai, established in 1963 with a legacy of 57 years. And they offer over 3,000 pathology tests all across Mumbai. And they've been at the front lines, have been seeing this firsthand for the last several weeks. So Dr. Ajay, I really am very grateful that you could do this today.
No, my pleasure to be here. So I hope I can I can shed some light on the whatever people want to ask. And if anything is not clear, please feel free to ask me again. That's fine.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to, there's so many questions and we're going to try and get through some of them at least, because I know you're probably very strapped for time. But the question that everybody wants to know is, do these, the variants that we're seeing in India that are fueling this pandemic, do the
Yeah.
vaccines, Covishield and Covaxin, do they work against
Right.
these variants? Do they protect against these variants? I think that's a burning question on everyone's minds right now.
Right. So basically, first of all, we have to understand what we mean by a variant, right? So people call them mutants rather, but variants is the right term. Now there are three broad types of variants. The first type is variants of interest. The second is variants of concern, and the third type is variants of high consequence. So all the variants which we are currently seeing are just various variants of interest. So they haven't really been called variants of high consequence and are not really not proven to lead with a lot of data into very severe illness. So what the major variants currently circulating in India today are, one would be the UK variant, which was the first one. Basically, none of these variants are actually variants of high consequence, right? So we currently in India, we have what we call as a double mutant. The meaning of that is that there are two mutations which have taken place in in the virus. One of these mutations lead to virus variants which can actually escape neutralization, not completely but partially. So when I say escape neutralization, that means the antibodies which are formed with these various vaccines, they are neutralizing antibodies, and these neutralizing antibodies can prevent the infection in human cells. So these variants have some tendency to a small extent to prevent the neutralization. That's one thing. And the second mutation which has occurred is one which actually increases the infectivity of the virus. So there are two different types of mutations. There are multiple other mutations as well. So the term double mutant is not correct, but this I would call it the double mutant because the media is right now calling it that. But there are multiple mutations. For example, each virus actually has more than 3 or 4 mutations. So it's not right to call it a double mutant. But these are the two common effects of this mutation. Now, the good part is that the vaccines, to a large extent, are effective against most of these variants. But compared to the original wild type of the virus, most of the vaccines have proven to be less effective against the South African variant. And in India, there is a reduced neutralization ability of the vaccine. Yeah.
So basically the question was about the variants, and you mentioned
Yeah.
that by and large the vaccines are effective. I mean, so if you do get
Yeah.
sick, you will not get very badly
A
sick.
severe illness. Absolutely. Yeah.
One of the questions also was about, the ideal interval between the vaccine doses.
Yeah.
So what's the ideal time once you've taken the Covishield? Some people say 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Others say the longer you wait, the more efficacious the virus will be.
Yeah. Yes. So there are a very important thing to understand is that even so the earlier duration interval which was given was about 4 weeks between two doses. So in that duration it was said to be about 70 to 80% efficacious, and but it was still 100% efficacious against mortality even at 4 weeks. So there, I would not say that you should wait for 8 weeks to get 90% efficacy against infection, because in the current rise of the number of cases, it is more important that people are protected against severe illness and mortality So it's important to get the vaccine as soon as possible in the second dose, and get the second dose even at 4 weeks, which was what was suggested earlier.
Okay.
So even at 4 weeks, it prevents mortality, and that's the most important thing.
So 4 to 5 weeks is about what right time?
Yeah,
The window.
is the right time.
So, Dr. Ajay, what is the COVID test that people should take? What is the most important test to do for diagnosis of COVID-19?
So
and
the
you're
gold
at the
standard.
front line of doing the test,
Yeah,
because I don't know how many thousands of tests you all are doing
yeah.
every day.
So to diagnose COVID-19, there are only two tests which can actually diagnose COVID-19. One is the antigen test, and the other one is the RT-PCR test. Now, the antigen test, the advantage of an antigen test is that it's very quick. It can be done on site, and whenever there's no access to a PCR lab, then you can do the antigen test. So if an antigen test gives you a positive result, then it correlates with PCR, and it's positive, correctly positive. So basically, it's very specific. It doesn't diagnose it as a false positive. The problem comes when it gives a negative test result. So when the viral loads are lower, then the antigen test can give a false negative report. So that's the risk, because it can obviously, in asymptomatic and those with the lower viral loads, it can be a false negative and can increase transmission to their family members and people in the general community. So the gold standard test would still be the RT-PCR test, which has a very high sensitivity as well as a very high specificity.
So
Apart from that, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, so this is the gold standard, and then there are a couple of other tests which use similar technology, and a point of care test which are used in hospital setups, which are just like the PCR test but are much more expensive, but they're very, very quick to run. So for example, there's one test by Abbott which can give you a report in about 15 minutes. Then there's one test by Cepheid which can give you a report in 1.5 hours. So these are also very good tests. It's just that they're quite costly and they're not available easily.
So who should take the rapid antigen test then? And who would you recommend that they should take that test?
So rapid antigen test
it's not that accurate.
It's not that accurate. It should only be taken in places where there are large gatherings and you need reports very quickly. So first of all, you should not have large gatherings. But if there's for some reason no access at all to a PCR lab and you need reports for some people, then that's the only time you should do an antigen test. So let's say the PCR test is going to take 48 hours or 72 hours for you to get the report. Then an antigen test would be important.
So that's not what you would really recommend?
No.
Yeah. I have a question that somebody's asking is, what are the differences and merits of the RNA vaccine over the DNA vaccine? I have one question someone's asked.
Okay, so the biggest benefit, first of all, the difference in the vaccines, as you know, is one is a viral vector vaccine and the other one is an RNA vaccine. So when you say viral vector, it's like, think of it as a Trojan horse. So you're putting a common cold virus into another container and sending it into the human body. This gives rise to, so it's like a virus which has been activated only so that it forms spike proteins and doesn't complete its entire life cycle. So it stops at the time it produces the spike protein, it incites the immune response, and the same antibody which it is inciting will finally end up destroying it. So it's like you're putting the adenovirus, which is an inactivated virus, which is a common cold virus, into another cell and injecting a person with that. And that causes the formation of spike proteins in the body. That gives rise to antibodies and that kills the cell itself. That is the basic thing, and that's the common way in which the AstraZeneca vaccine works, the Sputnik vaccine works, as well as the Johnson & Johnson vaccine works. Now, the other type of virus, the vaccines are the RNA vaccines. Right. So then think of this as a playbook or a sort of a manual which we are giving the body, the cells of the body, and on how they should produce spike proteins.
So this is for the Pfizer and the Moderna, right?
Pfizer and the Moderna. So it just gives you a blueprint on how you should make the spike protein. So your body takes that and makes the spike protein. So the biggest, how I would say, is the advantage and disadvantage of the Sputnik and these other vaccines is that the storage requirements are very much easier as opposed to the Pfizer and Moderna, because RNA is the most labile, or the most it can easily be destroyed. So if there is any temperature fluctuation for whatever reason during storage or transport, the efficacy of the vaccine can go down tremendously. Now, considering both of them are stored correctly and then given to people, the efficacy of Pfizer and Moderna are definitely higher than that of the other vaccines. When we say efficacy, again, it's the efficacy to reduce the number of infections. But the mortality reduction is very similar in both.
Right.
So in a country like India, obviously, if the storage was not an issue, a Pfizer and Moderna would be a better option because it can prevent the transmission. If you don't get infected, then the transmission of COVID to other people also will reduce. So that is the basic difference between the two. The main, the best part about it is the efficacy, which is much higher in these compared to the others. Now, what people worry about is that the long-term side effects of Pfizer and Moderna are actually not known. What kind of impact will it will have on your body? To some extent, that's correct because what we are seeing is that the data is only for a year now. It's not even been a year since we started vaccinating.
Of
But
course.
by and large, there doesn't seem to be any other side effect apart from what was listed in the literature. So as of now, it's safe. And if you have any options of choosing, then Pfizer and Moderna would obviously be a better option, provided it is stored correctly. But if you have no option and you just take whatever you get, I mean, you can't go vaccine shopping as of now.
And what is the efficacy of the Covishield right now and Covaxin?
Covishield is about anywhere between 70 to 80% if it's taken 4 weeks apart, and it's 80 to 90% if it's taken 8 weeks apart, 8 to 12 weeks apart.
Okay.
And Pfizer Moderna 90 to 95%.
Right. Question is, if you've had COVID and you've already recovered from COVID, should you still get vaccinated? And if you have to get vaccinated, what is the ideal time to take the vaccine?
Yeah. So this is a very peculiar situation. So I've seen so many cases. So there was a study done actually in AIIMS in Delhi to compare those who had COVID and those who haven't had COVID, and both of these groups were given vaccines. So what they noticed was that those who had COVID, first of all, already had antibodies in their bloodstream, while those who didn't have COVID didn't have any antibodies. After giving the first dose of the vaccine to those who have already had COVID-19, the response of the vaccine was very, very high. So it is equivalent or more than the second dose in those who had not got COVID before. So basically, once you have had COVID today, then you should wait for at least 2 to 3 months before getting the vaccine. That's number one.
So 2 to 3 months.
Yeah. Secondly, people ask whether you need both doses. Data suggests right now that you may need only one dose. But until we have more data to substantiate that, still 2 doses would be important. They will not do any harm. So continue taking 2 doses. But even 1 dose in people who have had COVID will give a tremendous antibody response.
So those people are in a better position in that sense when they take 1 dose and still be all right.
Yeah.
The question of false negatives. So I think a lot of people have asked this question that you could be positive, but when you go for your test, it shows up negative.
Yeah.
And that because of the incubation period, that is if you're going too early. So what's the right time to go get yourself tested?
Yeah. So now again, this data, when we first had the pandemic starting, it was recommended that you should go on the 3rd or 4th day of fever for your test, because anything earlier than that would give a false negative result. Now what is happening is that the incubation period, in some cases we are seeing, instead of 4 days, which was the median incubation period, it has come down to 2 days, 2 to 3 days. So the chances of a false negative in that regard are now lower. But the FDA has put out a guideline recently on some of the kits which are being used. And where the problem will arise is that if a lab is using a kit which detects only one gene in the PCR kit, and if that gene is mutated in the virus, then there is a chance of a false negative. So whenever a lab chooses a kit, ideally you should choose a kit which has multiple genes, so that even if there is a mutation in one gene, you will still detect the other 2 genes. So that is the rationale behind it. And most of the kits today have at least 2 genes, if not more. So even if there is a mutation, there's a very small reduction in the sensitivity, and so the false negative component because of this would be quite low. It's not going to make a major impact.
Okay, so then the minute you start feeling those symptoms and you are feeling unwell and there have been people in your household who've tested positive, you should take the test.
Yeah, so 2 to 3 days later, you should take the test.
And do these RT-PCR tests capture the variants?
Yes, they capture the variants.
But they're quite broad.
They do capture the variants. Broadly, they do capture the variants, yes.
So what are some of the side effects of these vaccines? I've heard of people, of instances where people, even after the second shot, have actually had full-blown COVID and had a raging fever. I know somebody who had a raging fever for 3-4 days after having gotten the second dose. And I think there was a lot of confusion as to what they should do. And
Right.
really,
So,
was it just a side effect or was it the real thing?
so basically, so a lot of people ask me about, do you get COVID with the vaccine, right? So does the vaccine give you COVID? So the thing is, first of all, in any vaccine which you take, especially the ones in India, so Covaxin as well as Covishield, they don't have the coronavirus at all. What they have is the adenovirus. So you will not get COVID because that virus is not even there in the vaccine.
Okay.
Secondly, most of the cases which have happened post-vaccination happened within 5 days of visiting the vaccination center. So large majority of the cases, when they go for the vaccine dose, they are probably catching COVID in the vaccination center itself. That is why you see more than 80% get COVID 5 days after the vaccination shot, whether it's the first or the second shot. So that is the issue.
So they're getting exposed between the first
They're getting
and
exposed.
second shot.
Yes. The common side effects, if you ask me, especially in Covishield and Covaxin, or rather the adenovirus-based vaccines, are fever, mild to moderate fever, chills, and local swelling and inflammation, redness, inflammation, swelling, body aches, muscle aches, like a flu. It sort of feels like a flu, but some people have an exaggerated response at the local area of vaccination, and that gives rise to redness, swelling, edema, and all those things. But all this subsides. The incidence of serious side effects is very, very low, and the incidence of deaths post vaccination are extremely low.
Good. That's very
Now, with that, yes, and with the RNA vaccines, the most common side effects are actually myalgia. So there's severe muscle ache and body ache, along with chills and fever.
Okay, so that is the Covaxin you just mentioned.
No, with the RNA vaccines, with Moderna and Pfizer, these are the usual side effects.
What about Covaxin?
It's similar to Covishield. The side effects are similar.
I have one question where people are asking: are children testing positive more in the second wave?
Yes, unfortunately, we are seeing a larger percentage of children testing positive right from the ages of 6 months to 12 years. So that is the unfortunate part about this, and I think it's because of the fact that it's more easily transmissible. So that's why it's going in children. But the good part is that they don't have severe symptoms. They usually have a mild fever, but the risk is that in some cases there is a more serious illness, but that happens in under 1% of cases. So it's a very rare event to take place. The bigger risk, if you ask me, is that if children play downstairs and they're asymptomatic, since they're catching it this time, they can spread it to the family members. Since they're a large reservoir of infection, children. Nothing will happen to the children, but they can spread it.
So they could be asymptomatic and they could be carriers. Yes. But in terms of themselves getting sick, the chances of them getting very sick are very low. So that's extremely reassuring to parents. I had one more question about, I think this must be pertaining to a vaccination slot. Someone's asking, if I get a slot and I'm unable to go for the vaccine, do I reschedule it and do I rebook? I think there must be a lot of anxiety about trying to get those slots at the moment.
You'll have to reschedule it. You'll have to reschedule it and then go again.
So, Dr. Phadke, this vaccine is highly contagious. It is highly transmissible. It's a virus that doesn't like crowded places. It doesn't like confined spaces.
Yes.
What would you advise to people? I mean, clearly, it's as we all know, it's aerosol, it's airborne. So even within the homes, even if you don't get anybody inside your homes, are you still at risk, or are you better off if you don't go out at all? Because that's probably the only way to beat this virus, is to stay at home.
Yeah. So basically, the only way to really prevent the virus from infecting you is by staying at home. But that may not be practical for everyone who has to go to work. So the main thing you can do is, again, wearing probably a double mask. So N95 inside and a surgical mask outside, or a cloth mask outside, and maintain social distancing. The good part is, as we thought before, there was a study in Australia which actually said that it can get transmitted through surfaces. So people went crazy trying to clean various surfaces. But now it turns out that it's not really transmissible through surfaces. Okay. Right? So it is only transmissible if you are within, say, 6 feet or so of someone else. So maintain social distancing and wear double masks and get vaccinated. All three things are extremely important. And do not go into crowded areas. That would be the only way to prevent it. Now, at home, the BMC has started saying to wear masks at home. I understand where they're coming from, because if somebody is going out and then coming back home, then you should be cautious and wear a mask at home as well.
What about in the lifts? I mean, a lot of people live in high rises.
Yeah.
You might be in the lift and there may be no one around, but that doesn't necessarily make you know.
Yeah. So there are lower chances of that, since it's aerosolized, and usually people don't spend that much time in the lift. So the main problem is that if you're with somebody in the lift and you're talking to that person without a mask, or he's talking to you without a mask, because the act of talking, simply talking, can spread a large number of droplets and aerosols into the air. So if the other person is wearing a mask, then aerosolization also is reduced by 95%. So if he's not wearing a mask, then yes, there's a risk, obviously. But if he's wearing a mask, even in a lift, then it's not going to be as infectious as we think it is, because it doesn't go it's not going to go that much via surfaces. So touching the handle is not going to really help.
Double mask
anyway,
double mask
double
is
mask
what
is
you would
crucial.
recommend.
Yeah. The N95 and a surgical mask would be important.
So if one person in the family is COVID positive and the others are negative, should that primary contact, should they also wait to get vaccinated?
Well, ideally they should wait. The whole point is that you should not take the vaccine during an active illness. So even if you're asymptomatic, there's no way to know whether you've been infected. So you should wait it out for some time and isolate yourself from that person who's infected and watch for symptoms first. And if symptoms are not there in a reasonable time period, say for 10 to 14 days, then you can go ahead and do the vaccine.
There are a lot of people who I've been also talking to people who are afraid to go to hospitals or to the doctor, and they self-medicate.
Yeah.
Is that something you're seeing also, and what would your advice be?
So as we know, there is no direct medicine which can treat the coronavirus or COVID-19 by itself. All that we have are usually symptomatic medications, and of course we have steroids. Now, this is the good part about this, is that it's a steroid responsive illness. So usually by day 5 and 6, if a person's condition has to worsen, it happens by day 5 or 6. And at that point of time, steroids need to be started. As long as that happens, most of the people will be fine. But self-medicating and starting steroids too early will be actually harmful to the person. So that should never be done. And now anyway, most of the general practitioners and consultants are actually treating people over the phone at home. So you must consult the person and ensure that you don't have any contraindications to any of the medicines which you are taking. So that's important. You should consult a doctor and then start medicating. Don't start it by yourself. You can take Crocin or paracetamol by yourself, but don't take anything else by yourself.
Right, especially steroids or anything.
Steroids and things like that, yes.
Medicines like that. We've been hearing a lot about the D-dimer. Can you explain to us what that is, Dr. Ajay?
Yeah. So D-dimer is a test which basically checks for clotting in your body. When there are blood clots formed in your body, the D-dimer is usually elevated. Now, what's happening in COVID-19 is that there are blood clots forming in the smaller vessels of the body, and because of which D-dimer cases are elevated in those who have severe illness. So the whole purpose of doing D-dimer by day 4 or 5 is to just check whether clots have formed, or if it's high, then there is a possibility of clots having formed which are very small. There's nothing to worry about. But the main use is that if D-dimer is say above 2000 or above 1500, and if there are other comorbidities, then doctors will usually start patients on heparin, low molecular weight heparin, or some kind of anticoagulant. So the only way they will start you on an anticoagulant is if your D-dimer is high. That's why you have to do D-dimer. And the second use is at the time of discharge, if the D-dimer remains elevated, then people would end up, the doctors would end up continuing low molecular weight heparin for another month post-discharge. That's why D-dimer becomes important to monitor. So they usually, if somebody is admitted in the hospital, at the time of admission, they would do it. And every 2 days, they would end up doing the D-dimer. So just to keep a watch on the trend of what is happening. So the trend is like a flat line or dropping, then it's fine. But if you suddenly start seeing a large increase, like a spike, then they will start increasing the dose and keep a closer watch.
So, Dr. Ajay, you have been dealing with this now for weeks, and actually, probably this is the second year in a row that you've
Yes.
really been day in and day out, 24/7. I'm dealing with grief and loss, and I can't imagine really what you've been going through, but it must be taking a personal toll on you as well, on your emotional well-being. And I think on
Yeah.
behalf of everyone, every single person who's tuning in or out there, everybody wants to thank you. I mean, we feel immense gratitude towards people like you. You're putting your life at every single day. So
No,
it
what we
must.
are doing is nothing compared to those residents and doctors who are working in ICU setups. In government hospitals, there are medical interns and doctors, residents who have been called from studying for their exams and actually working in BMC hospitals and COVID centers 24/7. And it's much harder for those people. For us, yes, for a period of time, it was number of samples which were coming into our lab was very, very high, so it was very difficult to manage that. So there was a day in which we did 12,000 samples in a day. And at that point of time, honestly, it was a very tough time, but that lasted for about 2 or 3 weeks, or rather a month. And then it has now come down, which is always manageable now. So it's fine.
Are you still seeing the same number? Has it dropped considerably? I mean, Mumbai is doing a lot
Yes.
better now than it had
Yeah.
this
It has
month.
dropped considerably, mainly because of the lockdown. Um, because of the chain of transmission has been broken. So they took the a very good decision at the right time, I would say, of actually imposing this lockdown, and the people of Mumbai actually followed it really well. So that has helped us tremendously, because it was going to go into a very bad situation if they hadn't done this.
Are we anticipating a third wave? I mean, I hope your answer is not yes, but is that something?
Um, well, though it really depends on what percentage of our population we vaccinate. And when we restrict, when we rather reduce the lockdown, or we stop imposition of the lockdown, and if we've not vaccinated, then there is a chance that there will be a third wave, but not in this way. But there can be a third wave. But if we do vaccinate and quickly, then the chance of a third wave would go down, basically. So it all depends on the vaccination rate and when we were to lift the lockdown.
Dr. Ajay, your advice to young people, because there's so many school kids, so many young people sitting at home, second year in a row, not being able to go to school. And I know you've been very involved with mental health initiatives
Yeah.
as well, with your Type of Thought initiative. What
Yeah.
advice would you give them? You know,
Well, it's difficult right now because you can't have play dates for your children with other children. But the only thing, there are these options of online classes which are organized, which can be done to a certain extent. And since luckily the parents are at home, I think spending time with your children and keeping them away from screens apart from this is very, very crucial. Getting them involved in some kind of, so we have all these interactive toys for younger kids. Getting those toys and playing it with them for some time would be the only thing you can really do right now. And if your child is, say, above 12 and between, say, 12 to 18, and if he's going through, there are a lot of symptoms of how do I say, loneliness, and even in kids, because they haven't interacted with other kids. So if you start noticing your child behaving differently than what he or she was, and being less, rather going into withdrawal and sort of not speaking out much, then there are certain signs like that which you have to watch out for. And if you feel any of that happening, then it's always better to get help online with a psychologist, or whoever you normally would go to, a child psychologist, just to see how to deal with it, especially if your child is behaving a little differently than he normally would. You can tell, right? So it's important to keep a watch for those signs.
it's not easy when you have toddlers in the house and you can't take them to the playground. I think
Yes.
that's very hard for parents as well as for, students.
It
I
is.
mean,
Yeah.
and actually, one more question was, who are the people who should not be vaccinated? Is that
Yeah.
something is a
That's a
concern?
very important question. I actually get a lot of questions about this. So a lot of people ask me, is it safe in people who have G6PD deficiency, steroids, blood pressure, diabetes, aspirin, anticoagulation, food allergy, drug allergy, or if you're immunosuppressed? The vaccine is absolutely safe in all of these conditions. all of these conditions. So the only time you should not have the vaccine is during any acute illness, during active COVID-19, and the third thing is if you have any known hypersensitivity to any of the components of the vaccine. For example, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines have something called as PEG, where 1 in a million people have an allergic reaction to it. So if you had a reaction to something like that, that's the only time you should not take it. Even if you have had a local allergic response to the first dose, that shouldn't stop you from taking the second dose, because in the second dose, that reaction is further reduced.
But then people with comorbidities like diabetes, heart
No,
conditions,
you must take
autoimmune.
it. You must take it. You must take it in that, in fact, because they need protection more than those who don't have comorbidities.
Right, right. I have a question. What would you estimate for everyone in India to get vaccinated? Thank you for the wonderful work that you do.
Yeah, estimate. If you go at the current rate, it will take 2 years. So if we have to literally go 2 or 3 times as fast as we currently are to get it done under a year.
Right. I had one more question. Your advice for people, kids who are fully vaccinated, but maybe in countries where they're dropping their guard, becoming more lax, traveling, you see pictures of people not wearing masks. What's your advice on that, please? Immense respect for the entire medical community and the frontline workers.
Yeah. So basically, if there are countries who have lifted I mean, they've not, so in New Zealand, for example, there is no COVID case in the last few months, so then it's fine. But in countries where some population is vaccinated, only 30% of the population is vaccinated, I would still advise wearing masks. So there is herd immunity only when at least 60 to 70% of your population is vaccinated. So until a country reaches the status of herd immunity, I don't think it is wise to let down your guard for any reason, even if you have been vaccinated with 2 doses. Because any vaccine you take is still not 100% effective.
And we're seeing so many people get it even after getting the second.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So if you do the antibody test after 1 month from the second dose, then how many antibodies do we have to have?
Yeah. So basically, the most important thing to understand is that you have to do antibodies to spike proteins. That is the test which you need to do. And you can't do the antibody to the nucleocapsid antigen, which was the older antibody test. So if you have antibodies to spike proteins, the higher the better, basically. So for example, if you want 80 to 90% neutralization, then you need to have a level above 1000.
Okay.
If it's 50%, then you need to have a level anywhere between 500 to 700. If it's 20%, it needs to be between 150 to 300. That is the basic thing. But one thing you have to understand is the antibody test only measures your humoral or other antibody-related immunity. The human body also has something called as the T cells. T cells, which is the cell-mediated immunity, which none of these tests actually measure. So there will be a component of immunity because of these cells, which we are unable to measure right now. So just because you have a very low dose doesn't mean that low vaccine, the antibody number doesn't mean you don't have immunity. There are many people who have 4 and 5 levels, where some have 2000 levels. So the ones with 2000 definitely have a higher response. One of the strategies which may come up in the future is that if they haven't developed an antibody response with one type of vaccine, they may try it with another type of vaccine or give a booster shot to those people as well.
So what's the ideal number for the antibodies?
It should be anything above 150 is good, at least.
Okay. Is it safe to get the vaccine in pregnancy?
Well, recently there was a study in Canada and which has just tested in about 78 pregnant women, and it has found it to be completely safe in pregnancy, and it induces an immune response, and this immune response even passes through the placental barrier and goes to the fetus, so it will protect the fetus as well.
Okay.
So that is a good part, but they have not yet incorporated it into the guidelines. So I think pregnant women and lactating women soon will be included in the guidelines as well. And Pfizer and Moderna are testing children right from 6 years of age now. So once that study is done, even those will be included down the line.
Are there any myths against COVID that you hear about and which you would like to clarify? I'm sure there must be a lot of myths out there.
Yeah, so some of the myths are, so a common myth is actually that the vaccine can cause COVID. The second one is that the virus can remain alive on surfaces for 4 days and 5 days and on the floor, and it's necessary to remove your shoes before entering your house. So that is not proven to be true. It doesn't last for so long, and the rate of infectivity is very, very low from surfaces. The third thing is people keep on asking in India for the CT value or the
Right.
cycle threshold value. And they say the lower the CT value, more serious is the illness. But that's not true again. So CT value is inversely proportional to the viral load.
Can
All
you
it
tell us
tells
what
you,
CT value is, Dr. Ajay?
yeah.
People who
So
may not.
CT value is basically, think of it as the number of cycles taken by a machine to detect the presence of COVID-19. So there are multiple cycles of the same reaction, right? So imagine if one person took 10 cycles to get a positive result, while the other person took 28 cycles to get a positive result. So naturally, the one which has 10 cycles has a higher viral load, because that's why on only 10 cycles we could detect COVID, while the one which was detected after 28 cycles has a lower viral load. That is the only difference between the two.
Okay.
So lower is your CT value, higher is your viral load at that time. But it depends on which day of the illness you're doing your test, right? So somebody who does the test on the second day of the illness will have a low CT value, while somebody who does it on the seventh day of illness will have a high CT value. So you
Right.
can't compare the two at all.
So it does not remain constant. It'll
So it
of
does
course
not
depend
remain
on the
constant.
severity of the infection.
Yeah.
Someone's asking if they're vaccinated during pregnancy. Would my newborn baby be immune? Good question.
In many cases, yes.
One myth I read on your website actually earlier was there's no evidence that suggests that pets can transmit the coronavirus.
Yeah. That's a good sign.
Yeah.
But there have been cases recently in India now with the newer variant that in lions, the Asiatic lions, which recently tested positive for COVID-19.
Yes.
Again, the good part is none of them are actually serious. None of these pets have any kind of serious illness at all. And animal to human transmission is extremely rare.
And once again, these mutants or these variants are very contagious and easily transmissible, but there is no data or evidence to suggest that they lead to more mortalities or could be more fatal.
No,
We're
not
in
at
a
the
good
moment.
zone. There's good news in that sense that there's no
Absolutely.
any evidence, no scientific data yet on that, right?
Yeah, there's no data on that yet. There are always anecdotal stories coming out from all over the place, but there is no compiled data to say that there is a severe illness in some people and over others because of a variant. So the problem is that in India we are not doing that much sequencing. So in the United Kingdom, they've done sequencing for a large number of the COVID cases. So they know, okay, which patients have which variant has led to what kind of illness. In India, not even one, I don't think we are even sequencing 0.5% of the total number of cases. We need to start sequencing more.
So what would that sequencing tell us if we speed up on that?
It will tell you, it will tell you what mutant, what variant are we dealing with. And then you could compile the data and say, okay, this kind of variant leads to this kind of illness.
Right. So, Dr. Ajay, I know we've taken up a lot of your time. I've asked you many questions. Very quickly, just to wrap up, any advice you would give to people right now? People in India,
Yeah,
people globally.
basically get whatever vaccine, take whatever vaccine you can get. Don't go vaccine shopping. Whatever it is, just take it. Number two, try and stay at home. Wear a double mask, and don't let your kids go downstairs. And a very, very, very important thing is don't try to treat yourself at home, especially if you have severe comorbidities, right? Then please inform your doctor and let the doctor decide what he should do, rather than you deciding. If you're young and if your immune system is fine, it's still okay. But if it's somebody above 65 with severe obesity, out of control diabetes, or very high blood pressure, those kind of comorbidities you need to be careful of and ask the doctor right at the time to detect positive.
Great. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you so
No.
much, Dr. Ajay, for your insights. Really appreciate it.
Welcome.
Stay safe, and stay well.
Yeah, you too.
We're looking out for you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Welcome.